All right, click on the link to my channel here over at SubStars, now over at Odyssey. SubStars also has articles as well. So Fantastic Four in the Silver Surfer. When I say that movie is woke, people are going to look at it and go, it's not that bad, and you have a hair trigger. The thing is, both can be true. Somebody said this movie didn't do as well as Superman because Superman was made for kids, but adults could enjoy it. Like a lot of super successful movies, like Superman, Star Wars, a bunch of others are like that. And they said this movie was more geared towards adults, I guess. It was a little bit slower, but kids could also watch it, but for whatever reason, kids were not that familiar with it. And then the other thing I'm trying to think of is like I'm coming at this from a perspective as someone who's familiar with Marvel Comics and some of DC and this comic, but I probably realized that like most people who are seeing the movies now, they've heard of the Fantastic Four comic, and as a kid they might have gone through it, but under a certain age, comic books just don't have the saturation that they used to. You got to kind of be like Gen X grew up reading comics. Even kids who weren't into comics were still they would still read a comic now and then. They weren't necessarily like trying to read the story from month to month, but it's just a whole different world now because they pretty much killed comics. So they're gonna say this isn't that bad, but you got to look like, well, are you familiar with the comic? And then it's like if nobody's familiar with the comic and they violate comic canon, depart from it, the comic book, then it's not like you can really say the movie is bad because you're just not marketing, you're not selling to a comic book audience anymore. So at some point everything just becomes Transformers. It's just CGI and explosions in the background and Megan Fox running across the desert. And two, people have been brainwashed by woke movies, especially over the past 10 years, that they've started not to see all these little wokeisms where you got to put on the They Live sunglasses and start taking notes of movies, even if it's just kind of internally. Every little switch they do, every little departure they do, look at what they did, and it's like it's going to be for a woke reason. Movies never go in the opposite direction, though there's a huge market out there for right of center type of movies, nationalist, conservative, whatever you want to call it. And it's just, other than maybe a Mel Gibson movie now and then, it's just not being met. So for example, Star Wars 77 is a great example of the kids movie that adults liked. Was like lightning in a bottle with the cast, so a lot of the plot was just there to allow the actors to have chemistry and great one-liners between each other. Like the three main cast members, you'll never get that kind of thing again. And was it something about like you'll forgive more mistakes in a movie if you like the cast, the actors, the chemistry. And they did with Star Wars, and they didn't with Disney Star Wars. It just, nobody liked Daisy Ridley, and they didn't like the whole diversity thing thrown in there, and it felt like it was just too much. It was like sex swapping characters that didn't need to be sex swapped. And so there's no audience investment, and a good way of judging that is looking at toy sales and merchandise sales. Are kids into this stuff? And kids are definitely not into this kind of stuff anymore. Toys and t-shirts and all that stuff that was huge in the 70s and 80s. While people are still talking about 77 Lucas Star Wars, Kevin Smith's movies, Gen X jokes about it a lot, but it's like there's a fair amount of people who are at least still familiar with it and can quote lines from the movie, like Braveheart. So the problem with Fantastic Four 25, and there's a 90s version of Fantastic Four you should check out, is awesome, but also they did the Captain America 90s version. I think they're Golden Globus Productions, super low budget, but not bad for the money they had. The problem is verisimilitude, where there is just too many points of woke for the viewer to be immersed in the movie, even though admittedly it had a good Thursday night box office return, and it might break even. It needs to get like $500 million to break even. And it's like, yeah, it'll probably get that, but it won't. It's not a huge hit. It's not the $1 billion hit of what Marvel used to do for the $200 million movie. Because one, it was a pretty CGI-filled movie, and that part actually did look fantastic. CGI has come a long way, and it's worth it to see the glowing eyes of Galactus, especially on a big screen. But the good parts of the movie are the CGI with Galactus, the 60s retro alt futurism, It's kind of like I didn't know there was a term for that. I'm thinking it's just like steampunk, but set in the 1950s and not the 1850s. What was that movie with the book trilogy with the bears, the armored bears, and I forget that Australian chick. But there's three books, and I guess the first movie didn't do. It's like a subtle knife. Was it Philip Pullman or something? The first movie didn't do well enough, and it's a bummer because I thought the movie was really good, and the books were really good too. It's like it sucks that like they're not willing to count on the sequel or the second movie in the series getting an audience. So there's one scene where, I mean, it's, you look at movies, you think like, okay, the movies cost a ton to make, and there's no way to go, oh, well, let's just spend $200 million and take a risk on a movie because there's a small dedicated fan base to these stories. It's like that just can't happen. Though in the future with, AI and CGI, that might happen. But then you got to have a way, because you're talking about intellectual property, you got to have a way to monetize it, and you'd be doing it against their intellectual property rights. So you'd have to do it kind of privately. But if if you could do something like AI CGI for a movie that people wanted to see and go, okay, it only cost $10,000 for our time invested in this, and we're going to be selling it illegally, you might be able to get your money back on that. Anyway, so there's one scene where the invisible woman tells the flamer guy to kill the woman who's after her baby, and that was the one scene that stuck out with me, and kind of the one good scene in the movie, because that scene had impact, because Sue Storm is a diplomat, and she's trying to find peaceful solutions, but the female surfer is coming for her kid. Yes, there's a female Silver Surfer. Spoilers. So she tells the flamer to kill him, and he's sitting in his Millennium Falcon, gunship seat. It's the one scene in the movie that was kind of a diamond out of the coal, because you realize like she would do anything to protect her kid and her family. So in brief, the woke element, and I just kind of like that when women in movies suddenly have to turn badass, because it's like Aliens with Sigourney Weaver. The reason that motivation worked and why she wasn't a Mary Sue was because the movie forced her into that situation where like a Daisy really didn't work, because, well, one, she was just too much of a Mary Sue, and the audience generally doesn't want like some alpha chick unless she's forced into the situation, and then it's like it kind of excuses it. And I know that's not like feminist politically correct. So in brief, the woke elements in this alt-earth 626 are the two main characters who bear the most responsibility, are the two women, this Vanessa Kirby and who's the other chick. They're Julie Garner. They're the ones who are taking all the responsibility on their shoulder, and which is not how the comic book did it, and she was a male in the comic book. And then there's the endless crowd scenes of patriotic Asians and blacks. For some reason, they were massively overrepresented, cheering on their four white heroes. So there's a little bit lacking of the suspension of disbelief. The camera was constantly panning and pausing on a non-white face. It felt like just saccharine, cloying levels of propaganda. And of course, there's an obese black woman in every position of intelligence, trust, or authority, because everyone knows that's who's in charge of aerospace programs and major media and whatnot. Now, here's the woke subconscious part. This is alt 1950s America, and it's super non-white, with nons in all positions of power, and they all get along together, and they're super patriotic. Like, what are you patriotic for? An economic zone. And they love their four white heroes. The director is doing that because he's creating a subconscious juxtaposition where the viewer is thinking of the very white real Earth 616 at the time period, where the 1950s was very white and awesome, of course. But they're implying that this is the 1950s that could have been without Europeans, or with fewer Europeans and more diversity, in this case black and Asian specifically, which consciously, logically doesn't make sense, because the 1950s space program and America was very white, and it was the best period of America, relatively speaking. It was the most advanced, the safest, highest trust, and in 1955 had the peak white population of over 85%, and now it's down to 55%. The country's a shithole. No offense, though. I know there's like 0 black listeners to this. There were blacks involved in the space program, and the GPS program, believe it or not. So there's a lot going on. It's like probably literally 0 black people are listening to this. So there's a lot going on with a movie like this. A ton of cultural Marxism that gets overlooked because it's not politically correct to discuss it. Hey, look how super advanced and cool this almost non-white America is. Look at the Wakanda levels of, let me get to the images. The Wakanda levels of retro futurism. And sure, there's pregnant women, this blonde chick running around, putting herself in danger, being pretty much the hero when it's supposed to be Mr. Stretchy guy there. That all makes perfect sense, at least in the director's mind. And they get mad at you when you show them the pure white 50s was actually responsible for most of these real scientific advancements. For the Disney movie consumer, reality is racist and sexist, of course, and pregnant women can do anything and put themselves in danger because, of course, that's natural. And there was a comic book that back in the diversity in comics days where some chick was on the cover of one of these comics and she's pregnant and she's like in a battlefield or something. It's just, I mean, the early days of diversity in comics, when he was covering those comics, was probably the absolute peak of just the stupidest Ms. Marvel, Captain Marvel kind of stuff. I went back and I looked and see, I guess Captain Marvel and Ms. Marvel, they got to the end of their runs and they don't have new runs yet. It's kind of weird. So the people, like the audience, the Disney fans get mad at people because they believe the reality on the big screen as opposed to actual reality where this stuff doesn't kind of happen. So in short, you can save your money. Fantastic. It's not worth going to the theater for. That's the point. A lot of people have big screens at home now. You got like a subwoofer behind the couch and speakers on both sides. It makes it harder to justify going out when you have a killer sound system. And maybe Wooflu had something to do with keeping people home. Maybe they got more invested with staying at home and kind of fixed up their living room, or have that whole thing down pat. The short answer is this movie is way over the top, diverse and girl power, and they had and the thing is, it's one or the other with movies, and there's only so much woke you can take. If you want to have a diverse background scenes, and if you watch a movie, you know what I'm talking about. I know it sounds kind of strange. Or you want to have girl power, pick one. And they went for both, and it's just too much. The audience doesn't connect with something that is like rings of power type of propaganda. And it also felt like they had a fundamental misunderstanding of the comic book source material and its transition to film, where they try to lighten things up with humor. None of it worked. It didn't fit the movie. The guy was trying to be, the fire guy was trying to be Chris Evans, which I think he did play the fire guy in one of the earlier Fantastic. Maybe I wonder if they're doing that on purpose. He had that same kind of vibe where he's trying to like crack jokes as kind of the straight man or something. So I saw it the other night, and the other thing is, enough with the vaguely ethnic Pedro Pascal. It feels like they're using him in just everything, oversaturated. He's a guy who's always feeling up women around him because he says he gets nervous. Yeah, I get nervous too. I need to feel breasts constantly. That's how I relax. He doesn't touch men, and he doesn't touch ugly chicks for some reason. So you got like him and Chris Evans and the Guardians of the Galaxy guy. What's that guy's name? I think he was in the dinosaur movies, where they're in a lot of different superhero characters. Like one guy will be in, like, was it Ryan Reynolds? Will be in like a DC movie, The Flash, and then he'll come out and play, Deadpool or something else. You can just use new actors. You don't have to, like, I know the name recognition of Pedro Pascal is up there, but it does take you out of the movie when you see this guy in every movie. So he's playing the role of the main stretchy guy, and he is just way too effeminate for the role. And I mean, he's not quite white enough. He's, I don't know, Brazilian or something, and isn't like that the worst country? It's like, that goes, the diversity is our strength, and you point out Brazil. It's like, that's the most diverse country on earth, and it's a shithole. Sorry, Brazil. And they don't know what to say to that. Somehow they some of they'll get mad at you. But in the comic book, he's the lead character, and he's kind of a, if I remember right, kind of a stiff character, and super smart, except when Shuri in the movies, of course, is showing up. The smartest guys in the Marvel universe are him, Iron Man, son of a bitch, who's that other guy who was there? The Hulk, and then they go meet Shuri, and it's like, oh god, she's so much smarter than we are, because of course she's a pox walks. So this is it's current year, and it's all girl power all the time. So the Invisible Woman is kind of the lead character. Someone says she has resting bitch face the whole movie. They actually, in the interview, they actually said another word for bitch, but that's good enough. And he had to, Pedro Pascal had to explain it to her. Or I think he said she had resting, see you next Tuesday face, which is just a weird thing to say to somebody. The other thing I noticed is that they had her humorously use force against her male partners, her little force blasts, and that was definitely weird in current year because that's domestic violence, and they just try to accept it because she's a woman, and of course it's funny when a woman uses violence against her partners. Except it's like in current year, it just doesn't fit anymore. And you just look at it and go, well, if you turned it around, it wouldn't be funny. If the guys were using these little force blasts against the women, it would look like abuse. It's like, yeah, it's abuse either way. But it's kind of similar to Wonder Woman 84, where she snuggles a guy for a few weeks. And reluctantly, the feminists had to point that out, and it's just a massive failure to include sexual abuse as a plot point. And nobody at Warner Brothers pointed it out. Nobody took Patty Jenkins aside and says, "Hey, she's using this guy's body. There's a word for that. It's called rape." So with the Invisible Woman, violence from her is portrayed as cute for some reason because vagina. And spoiler, she saves the day. And just when the flamer guy is going to make a sacrifice, like in Disney Star Wars with the black guy and the Korean chick, another silver surfer chick comes along and saves the day. It's actually really similar to that scene where Rose Tico is in her ship and Finn is trying to make a sacrifice, and she pushes the ship out of the way and kisses him, and there's like, you set up a romance and you didn't go anywhere with it. And then she makes some like, love will save the day or something stupid. It's like, well, he was gonna destroy the ship. It was a sacrifice, and you set that up and you took it away, and then you set it up to transition into a romance, but then you didn't follow that up either. I mean, none of Disney, that was so fucking horrible. Every time I think of Disney Star Wars, I think of that wasted potential, and it pisses me off. So the good parts of the movie were the background CGI world that they built. It's at the retrofuturism. It's not Earth 616. It's a 50s, 60s alternative Earth vibe 628. That really worked because it was an alt history. In an alien 50s, but full of blacks and Chinese for some reason. And they're all super patriotic, so you know it's fiction. So the movie comes out at a time when people have been talking, people are more open now, saying some things that are now politically incorrect about movies and whatnot, about just not being interested in woke, gay, or girl boss, and that kind of stuff. Somebody called girl jobs globalist daycare to lower white birth rates and inflate the dollar even worse. And you can look at the past movies that push woke. This one, Superman, Black Adam, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Madam Web, The Marvels, Birds of Prey, Suicide Squad 1 and 2, Terminator, the chick edition, Charlie's Angels, Batwoman was so bad that they didn't release it, Flash, Furiosa, the latest Black Captain America, I forget the name of it, Thunderbolts, and then Wonder Woman 84. It's been a lot of movies that have not found an audience. It's easier to look at the few movies that did well, like Deadpool 3, maybe Guardians of the Galaxy 3 as well. I gotta admit, I never saw that one. So this world's in the alt 50s, but it's all girl bosses, including a black girl boss, and the city is basically black and Chinese, and the Fantastic Four is led by the violent Sue Storm, and of course they sex swapped the Silver Surfer. But I will say the way they did it in the movie actually makes sense because they're setting up kind of a romance between the flamer dude. But the movie is not what the audience wants. The best I can say is, like, it's almost okay. It kind of starts moving in the right direction. Like, Deadpool 3 was not a great movie. It was just moving in the right direction. But then they won't follow it up on that because the director had to fight to make the movie he wanted to make. You can list a lot of exceptions to the good parts of the movie. Everything is there. It visually works, but for the issue of diversity, which the audience doesn't give a shit about, and changing the lead from Richards to the pregnant lady. I mean, it's like they hit every... She wasn't just the strong wife. She was also pregnant. Silver Surfer, they sex swapped him. The background crowds are all non-white. It's just too many little points. Pregnant people don't go off on dangerous missions, and then yelling at her teammates when she isn't being violent with them, and her husband's sort of a soft pussy. Everything just is off, and it doesn't work. But if you're bleeding pussy left-wing soy bundle of sticks, the movie's probably going to work for you because you guys pretend, the left-wing people pretend to like all this kind of girl boss stuff. So one of the things about the super diverse crowd scenes, cheering and fake patriotic fervor, was I didn't feel any connection to them, especially now. The movies are not made in a vacuum. There's some political issues going on right now with how people feel about foreigners, and in the movie, like, you're not connected to foreigners. And the 50s East Coast in the real world was obviously much whiter and much nicer, obviously, but it would have been realistic to have a cheering white crowd in the 50s. That would have made sense, where they're sending off a spacecraft into the unknown, and the Fantastic Four is going on their adventure because it's their people that developed the science. They're cheering for their people. So when you see this movie and it's like it's just an economic zone country cheering for people who are not your tribe, that's just not realistic. And people are looking around at behavior globally now, and they know, it's not realistic. Clearly diversity is not working out. But in Earth 6228, it's super diverse, and it just feels fake. It just feels like propaganda, because that's what it is. I mean, you can look around at multiracial societies right now and they've absolutely failed. There's no part of them that work. They're just dirty, violent, hate-filled hellholes. And I mean, you look at New York, for example. We're a third worlder. We're literally burn you alive in a subway cart and people just walk by. But Hollywood is going in this bizarre fictional direction to gaslight the cattle debt slaves and keep them placated so they don't revolt in a civil war, where it's, really the only way to get kind of... violence is the language of the unheard. Oh, yeah, J6, right? No, not like that. So they build these Pravda-level fictions where it's a Shangri-La that's just pure Soros propaganda. It takes you out of the movie, and that's why the movie is probably not going to be it's definitely not going to be an amazing hit. It's on chart to just break even, which is what a lot of movies are doing now, unless the left wing decides to show up for the pregnant lady fighting the diversity hire surfer, or the fat black lady is running around in her Hillary Clinton suit in charge of everything. It's just too much for me. The world they built is too Pollyanna. It's just the endless... I don't know if they're going to show it in these images. The endless crowd shots of all that vibrant cultural enrichment. And, realistically, if you saw that, they'd be rioting for something, to burning down. It's like Antifa, but in this alternative world, everyone gets along. Anyway, I know that not everyone has the hair trigger I have, but with a lot of movies like this, you can just go sail the high seas to see if you're on board with it. If it looks fantastic, then okay, that's worth seeing it in the theater, but it just doesn't look fantastic. You're not gonna... The theater experience really can't be beat, I'll give you that, because it's not just the sound system and the big screen, because people have that at home, where they have, someone in one of the comments was telling, he's got a 7-foot TV or something. The problem is at home is that you have distractions. You have your cell phone. To really immerse yourself in a movie at home, you got to put your cell phone in the other room. I mean, unless you got more discipline than me, it's I literally have to put it physically away so I can, follow the movie. Anyway. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.